Invasion of Your Privacy was released on June 13th, 1985. The album peaked at number 7 in the US Billboard 200. Singles included Lay It Down, You're in Love, and What You Give Is What You Get. The album was certified double platinum in the United States. And I want to warn everybody right up front before I really get into anything on this review. For this review, I'm going to be repeating some of the things that I say several times. I would rather not do that, honestly, but they are things that just keep applying again and again in the case of this album and this band. And before you get mad at me for that, I didn't make this album. I wasn't in this band, so it's not entirely my fault. I just wanted to warn you. Also, and more importantly, this was one of my favorite albums from the 80s. I probably listened to this album as much as almost any other album from that time. But that being said, I'm far enough away from 1985 now to look back with a little clearer view and see that this is also an album that I see as extremely flawed for many different reasons. And in the interest of giving it a fully fair shake, whichever way you happen to feel about it, I am going to talk about those flaws in this review. I don't want this whole video to be a bunch of negativity, like some people might honestly feel was the case when I reviewed Motley's Theater of Pain. I mean, this is no Theater of Pain, right? Well, let's get on with it and we'll just see about that. Okay, so Beau Hill produces again, but not without some resistance from the band. Now, I'm in no way particularly loyal to Beau Hill. I have no reason to be. I've never met the guy. I don't owe him anything. But I do think he was a great producer. And when I listen to these interviews with him, I just can't help but question the decisions made by this band at almost every turn. It seems to me like they just couldn't get out of their own way long enough to reach their potential. I mean, between all the paranoia and the mistrust and the infighting, is it any wonder we've had everybody in the band suing everybody else from the band every other day for like the last 20 years? We loved these guys in the 80s. I think nearly all of us did at one point. But geez, talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. That's Ratt. Speaking of loving this band, I want to take a minute to talk about another YouTube channel or two that I've come across, both about a year ago, that I absolutely love and I think deserve more attention. The first one I will mention is called Masked Maniac Reviews. This guy has about 400 subscribers right now, similar to me. And he does some really great retrospective videos, as he calls them, that offer a lot of detailed information about the band and the albums and the circumstances. And these videos are just great. If you're a really big fan of Ratt, I highly recommend Masked Maniac Reviews. You'll know him when you see him. He wears a wrestling mask usually, and he's got a big beard hanging out of it. Awesome channel. And I can't honestly talk about Ratt's presence on YouTube without talking about Rattmaster 86. Holy crap, does this channel have a lot of great Ratt. Rattmaster 86 has 9.64 thousand subscribers currently, and about 220 videos at this time. And as the channel description says, this is the ultimate database for Ratt bootlegs, the one-stop Ratt and Roll shop, everything from video to audio shows. So right off the top, if I'm a Ratt fan, I subscribe to both of those channels right away, which I already have. Okay, now that that's out of the way, invasion of your privacy. One of the first thoughts I have whenever I think of invasion of your privacy, besides the cover, is that everybody seems to consider Theater of Pain Motley Crue's #3 album for some reason, but Invasion, Ratt's #2 album. But Ratt's EP, to me, definitely counts for something in this discography. Also, Cellar is definitely Ratt's shout, in my opinion. The album that's consistently heavier from start to finish and does the most to bring new fans flocking to the band as they explode onto the world scene. Then, Invasion, the album actually compares more to Theater of Pain. Like Theater, Invasion comes out, is a successful album, but is honestly also something of a disappointment to most fans compared to what had come before. Like Theater, compared to Shout, most of the songs on Invasion simply do not hold up to what was on Cellar. Now, I love Invasion, like I said. I probably spent more time with Invasion than any other album Ratt released, even Cellar, because of the timing. I am not slamming this album. Like I said, I love this album, but I'm also going to tell you the truth as I see it. That's why I do these videos, and that's probably why you watch them if you do. And that truth is that this album, no matter when you had asked me in my life, while not necessarily a disappointing listen every time, has always been a clear and obvious disappointment compared to Out of the Cellar. And really compared to the EP, in my opinion. Invasion has some heaviness to it at times, but it is not a heavy album. Invasion has some great songs on it, but not very many of the songs are great. Like Theater of Pain, which had basically 2 songs that sold the album to people, those being Smokin' in the Boys' Room and Home Sweet Home. Oh, and the albums that had come before it, Invasion sold mostly based on Lay It Down and You're in Love. Oh, and the albums that had come before it. Meanwhile, every other song on either album feels a little obscure and a little inferior and a lot like almost exclusively deep cuts that don't typically come to mind right away when you think of either band. Now, I will be very quick to point out that I find Invasion superior to Theater of Pain in several ways. First, the cover of Invasion is far easier to look at, of course. Second, Invasion sounds far, far better to my ear. Next, while most of Invasion is, like I already said, inferior, nearly all of Theater is inferior. And the several inferior Invasion tunes are better than most of the 9 inferior Theater of Pain tracks, in my estimation. In other words, Invasion was a bit disappointing. Theater was fortunately for Motley Crue, pretty much overlooked disaster. Okay, so what do I mean when I say Invasion has some great songs on it, but not very many of the songs are great? I mean, Lay It Down, for my money, is honestly the only song from Invasion that was strong enough that it could have made the cut on Out of the Cellar. Lay It Down is easily one of the very best songs ever recorded by Ratt. And simply put, none of these other 9 tracks even approach that level. I don't think that's the band's fault. I blame the record company for forcing the band to begin the writing process while they were trying to decompress from the Out of the Cellar tour in the Bahamas, I believe it was, and for rushing the band back into the studio almost immediately after the Out of the Cellar tour, and for quite literally pulling the band out of the studio during the Invasion recording to send the band on tour in Japan because they got offered some shows.
This was the one where the record, we were in the studio, we were in the middle of it. Marshall, the manager, picked up the phone and called me, and he said, we just got a tour of Japan, but I have to take the band out of the studio to do it. Now, that was complicated for a number of reasons. Number one, at this point, since I'd had some success, I had time allotted for Ratt, and then I had backup projects all on my schedule. And so it was going to interrupt that. It was going to interrupt the flow, and it was just going to be bad for me. And so I said, okay, then here's what we're going to do. You can take the band to Japan, but I'm going to take the record back to New York so I can sleep in my own bed, and I'll finish up all the junk I need to do at Atlantic in New York, and then when the guys are finished, whoever I need will fly from Tokyo to New York, and everybody else can go home. So I went to New York, and I did all the junk that I needed to do. I had a couple of weeks worth of work, comping, cleaning up the tracks, just getting everything ready to go. And then Robin flew over from Tokyo, and I finished some stuff with him. And I think Steven flew over as well, and I finished some vocals with him. Juan didn't come, to the best of my recollection. So anyway, it actually worked out really well from my perspective because I didn't have the whole band there over my shoulder making me crazy while I was trying to mix. So Robin was the only one that stayed as the band's emissary, but Robin was always very cool. He'd chime in and he'd say, well, how about this or whatever, but generally speaking, he knew
And I get the record company formula of strike while the iron's hot, but I also don't agree with that formula and never have. Why? Because I have eyes. And because my eyes watched this happen time and time again throughout the 80s, with band after band being forced to hurry by record companies to adhere to a schedule of some sort, into following up breakthrough albums with subpar albums that, rather than capitalizing on a band suddenly exploding in popularity among fans, just left many fan bases scratching their collective heads and buying some other band's album next time instead because they had been let down. I will always believe that's exactly what happened to Ratt in the 1980s, a decade they might have owned after Cellar, but instead, a decade that saw them sell less instead of more, album after album, until their sales could no longer support their survival. And the fans had already flocked to other bands, other albums, and other tours, not because the new Ratt album wasn't available quick enough, but because the record company wasn't smart enough to give the band an extra month to come up with a better collection of songs rather than pushing them to record before they had something truly great to record again after Cellar. There's long been this question of, well, Out of the Cellar was huge, so what happened to Ratt's career after that? Why weren't they as big as Motley after Out of the Cellar? That, ladies and gentlemen, is what happened to Ratt's career. They never had a collection of songs as good as the collection on Cellar again. Why? Because guys in suits. That's why. Okay, so the tracks. Track 1, You're in Love.
You take the midnight subway train. You call another shots. You strip for lightning. You're in love.
Okay, everybody loves this song. Everybody is always saying how cool it is, how awesome it is, how it's really way heavier than people used to think. And it's got that awesome riff, and wow, how great and underrated. And I mean, I like it. I'll agree that the riff is cool. And then I have several other things to say about it, like, what are these lyrics? These are the lead-off lyrics on the album right after Out of the Cellar. Wanted man, back for more, I'm insane, lack of communication. And the next thing we hear from these guys, the opening track of the next album and the first single, is you take the midnight subway train, you're calling all the shots, you're struck by lightning, you're in love. What? Why? I know people love this song. I love this song. But this is not an album opener. This album has no album opener. One of the many flaws with this album that resulted from the record company not giving the band enough time to fill in all the blanks they needed to. I mean, I knew this wasn't a good album opener in 1985 when I was 15, let alone a good first single. It's a good song, a catchy song, but this is not a pop band or a pop album. You've got to do better as a pop metal band in 1985, people. Warren plays the lead guitar on this one. I will be keeping track of that stuff for this album, song by song, so we will be talking about it as we go. Great lead guitar here. But again, what's with these lyrics? We never wanted to go from the old Western theme of Wanted Man to Subway Love. Did we? Huh? I still gave You're in Love 5 stars. I gave it 5 stars because in and of itself, it really is a great song, but it's too soft sounding to be the opening track on the album that follows up Out of the Cellar. That's a recurring theme you're going to hear from me all the way through every one of these 10 tracks. Also, You're in Love is not good enough to be selected as the first single over Lay It Down. Huge, huge mistake by the record company and the band for allowing them to make it. Track 2, Never Use Love. Okay, so first we have You're in Love. You take your midnight subway train, you're calling all the shots. And then the very next song is another love thing. Never use love. Why? Why all the love? There wasn't any love on Out of the Cellar. And it sold 3 million copies. Now you're doing this? Cellar was loud. Cellar was dangerous. Cellar melted faces in spots. Cellar wasn't humble and kind and romantic. And what the fuck is happening here? This is a case of somebody not seeing the big picture for a band. There are people who are supposed to pay attention to that kind of stuff at record companies. People like, I don't know, record company people and album producers and bands. I actually do enjoy this song a lot more than I did back in the mid-'80s. It's got a catchy riff and vocal melody, and the solo by Crosby was a pretty memorable one. Still, this track was never going to make Cellar. And the fact that it's the all-important second track on Invasion just goes to show how weak the songs on this album are overall. I mean, I like it. I do. But I've never loved it. Not once. Compared to Cellar, this is absolute filler crap. This album for this band at this time is one of the worst mistakes in modern music history, in my opinion. Motley was lucky enough to survive something similar with Theater of Pain. For whatever reason, when all was said and done, Ratt just wasn't. Whether they knew it or not, Ratt would be trying to overcome this album for the rest of their career because songs like this were allowed to take up important spots on the album's track listing. That goes for You're in Love too. 4 stars. I gave it 4 stars. It's lucky to get that, but it does. Track 3, Lay It Down. Okay. If I'm just walking up to this album for the first time in the record store and I am seeing these song titles, You're in Love, Never Use Love, Lay It Down, Give It All, Closer to My Heart, I am completely convinced that this is an Air Supply album. If I'm trying to follow up Out of the Cellar, this is not how I do that. If I'm working for the record company who allows this to follow up Out of the Cellar, I'd better be fired before this follows up Cellar, not afterward. Okay, now, that said, Lay It Down is a great song and a great Ratt song. One of the very best they have ever done. Top 3 for me, all time in the Ratt catalog. That riff is one of the top 5 of the entire 80s in my book. Probably top 3 again, actually. And the rest of the song goes right along with it.
They were in town, and Warren came down to my apartment with his cassette player because he'd been writing some stuff on the bus. And so he came down and played me the beginning riff of Lay It Down. And I said, that's your first single. And I was so excited about making that record.
Anything else come to mind on Lay It Down? I just thought, what a follow-up single. I just thought that song was incredible. Of course, that riff, is one of those rare riffs that you think, really, there's just a few that you can really think of in that 80s period. That maybe Still of the Night by Whitesnake, and, some of those riffs that you're just like, holy shit. It was such a, every guitar player wanted to play it. Anything come to mind?
Yeah. No, I don't believe I did anything because it was, anything that I would have done to it at that point, I think would have actually detracted from the strength of the riff. And Warren always, his performances, were always just mind-blowing. I'd sit there with my mouth hanging open and just go, man, where'd that come from? And, but no, I don't. The biggest thing on Lay It Down was I did a few things different when I mixed it. And I put a keyboard part on it. And, I think I got a mini Moog and I reinforced some of the sub bass. But this is all the kind of stupid shit that I would do when I was by myself. And then I just put it on a track and hope that nobody noticed.
This may be the best written song of Ratt's entire career, as far as I'm concerned. As I already said, for me, this is the only song from Invasion that was good enough it could have made the Out of the Cellar album. Great video, too. This was supposed to be the first single from Invasion. Had the record company stayed out of producer Beau Hill's way, which of course they didn't. Huge mistake. Again, You're in Love never should have been released before Lay It Down. If I'm a Ratt fan watching MTV in 1985, which I didn't have yet in 1985 because I lived in a town with 2,000 people, as I've said before, but I'm watching and I see and hear You're in Love as the first thing from the new Ratt album that I've been waiting a year for after falling in love with the band on Out of the Cellar. I'm throwing shit at my TV when I see and hear it. On the other hand, if I see and hear the Lay It Down video first, I'm sprinting out the door to buy Invasion wherever I can find it. Record companies don't know everything. Clearly, this one barely knew anything about this band in 1985, and it screwed up the rest of Ratt's career. The band hands you one of the greatest pop metal songs of all time with Lay It Down, and you snub that song and put out something else, anything else, first? Now, the Invasion Wikipedia page says that Lay It Down was the first single that June and You're in Love was the second that September. But here's what Beau Hill had to say about the singles.
Lay It Down, pretty much, I know he had the initial riff, but did he kind of write the entire musical bed, or did that song come together quickly, or was it hammered out?
No, I think that one came together pretty easily.
I'm assuming you guys
pre-production.
You guys knew it was a hit, right?
Well, I did. And as a matter of fact, I will never forget this. We had just delivered the final record to Doug, and we were having cocktails at a restaurant right across the street from Atlantic. And my assistant engineer came over, and I was sitting at the bar having a vodka tonic. I'll never forget this. And he said, "Doug's on the phone. He wants to talk to you right now." And I went, "Oh, okay." So I went down, got on the phone, and he said, "I know you wanted Lay It Down to be the first single, but I'm going to overrule you, and we're going to make it You're in Love." And I mean, I was crushed that he had changed that. I mean, it's his prerogative. That's his job. But I was so disappointed because I was sure that Lay It Down was going to really be a high water mark for these guys, and really drive the sales of the record. I mean, as it turned out, You're in Love was also a hit, but I thought that would have been a better second single once Lay It Down had done its job.
Lay It Down was absolutely the way to come out, because it was mind-blowing.
Another stellar Warren solo here. One of the most melodically perfect and best constructed and most memorable guitar solos ever recorded in the history of rock and roll. 5 stars, of course. And if it could have gotten 10, I would have given it every one of them. Absolutely one of my favorite hard rock tracks of the entire decade of the 80s or any decade since. So, how did they come up with that guitar sound anyway? Isn't that just incredible? Well, again, I'll turn it over to producer Beau Hill to explain how that happened.
And I can tell you one other little anecdote of invasion of your privacy. And this one, this is actually, it's quite funny. So Warren was really unhappy with the fact that we played Cellar on one rig. He just was very incensed by that. And so while they were on tour for Cellar, Warren and his roadie would go into music stores all across the nation, and they would audition Marshall rigs. And so Warren started purchasing, and then they'd ship them back, and we'll put it in the warehouse. And from the whole tour, so when everything was done, he had like 25 heads and 20 or 25 4x4 cabinets in the warehouse, because he was just, by God, we made the money, we've done what we had to do, I've sacrificed what I needed to sacrifice, and by God, I'm gonna get the sound that I want to get. I went, okay, great. So when we went to set up to do Invasion, Warren said, I want 2 whole days of studio time, just me, myself, and my roadie, so that I can get my sound. Because you remember, we have now 25 heads, 25 or 30 different cabinets. His idea was that come hell or high water, he was going to check every head with every cabinet and come up with this impossibly monstrous and unique sound. And so I said, okay, sure. You're a multi-platinum recording artist. If you want to waste 2 days of time, okay, let's do it. So and I have a picture of this somewhere. It was really spectacular. So we were recording his guitar parts at Rumbo, and there was one ISO room that was pretty big. And so I told the roadie, I said, okay, set it up. So he set them up, 4 piled on high, or 3 piled on high, I guess, and 5 or 6 across, Marshall cabinets. And then over in the corner, he had these 25 heads, or however many it is, all piled up on top of each other, and everything was wired. And so I said, okay, Warren, great. So go for it and let me know what you've decided for your rig. And so he goes in, closes the door, and he's in the room with the amps right now, and turns everything on 10, goes in there and starts rolling away. And he's playing, and then he stops, and you can hear the and they're changing jacks, and his roadie's in there with him, and then he goes and he plays. So, and I'm in the control room, which is, I'm like 2 glass protection areas away from him, and I can't even hear myself think anymore. It's so loud. And so he comes in, and after about, I'll say 20 minutes, 30 minutes of this, he walks in and he said something to the effect of, well, I can't really tell. And of course, he was totally deaf at that point. And so what we wound up doing was I got his roadie to take the rig that we used on Cellar, and I just said, stick it in the mix, in the pile of amps. And so he gave me the look, and I said, this has just got to be between us. Just, I want you to put the head, replace one of his with the old one, and do this again. And so we went through this routine. So he went out and bought 25 amps, and then we wound up using the rig from the first amp, which he hated. Now all of a sudden he liked it, and so we used that for him on Invasion. And I don't think to this day he knows that we did a switcheroo on him. But sometimes it's just especially with those guys, I just kind of had to let them think that whatever it was their idea. Right. And I was like, yeah, that's great. Okay. Right. It was a little psychology 101 sometimes with those guys.
A role of a producer, right?
Yeah.
Hilarious, right? And thank goodness, because that guitar sound on both of these albums is one of my favorite guitar sounds ever. Track 4, Give It All. My least favorite track on the entire album, this song sucks. I didn't like it in 1985. I don't like it today. I won't like it tomorrow. I'm not crazy about the title, the riff, or the lyrics. The solo by Warren is, of course, great, but the song's just not catchy. It doesn't have an appealing melody, and I just don't get it being allowed on a Ratt album. I'm going to keep saying during this review that song never would have made it onto Out of the Cellar. It's really the central theme here. Of Give It All, I couldn't say it enough times if I was triplets caught in a time loop in every version of the Marvel multiverse. I just don't care about this song at all. And I'd like to be able to ask someone, anyone, how it made it on this album. But obviously, the answer could only be because they didn't have time to come up with anything better. I don't hate it. It's not terrible, but on the album that has to live up to Out of the Cellar, it's extremely forgettable, a total waste of what could have been a perfectly good track. And if your opinion is different, I can understand, but I just don't understand. 2 stars. Track 5, Closer to My Heart.
I listen to you, are you listening to me? The way that you are, it's easy to see. Feelings for you, now I feel free. I'm lost in time. It's not the way that you hold.
Great song. I give it 5 stars. I love it. It's always so weird to hear Ratt actually doing a ballad of any kind, isn't it? But I always really enjoy them. Maybe that's why. Great Robin Crosby solo here, too. They didn't release this song as a single for some reason. I'm not sure why. In 1985, the power ballad was starting to become a very important thing for bands like these. Dokken had already had a pretty good hit with Alone Again by then. Motley's Theater of Pain album came out a week after Invasion, but I have to imagine Home Sweet Home was on the Ratt radar quickly enough to make it make sense that people might buy the album if they could hear this track on the radio or certainly see it played in a video. Just another in the long line of decisions blown by Atlantic Records when it came to this band and this album, among others. It's a really nice lyric and a nice melody. It's not Home Sweet Home, but at least it could have brought Ratt into roughly the same universe for people who weren't that familiar with them other than Round and Round at the time. I don't know. I don't get it, and I never have. But guys in suits with their heads up their asses at the worst possible times.
I thought You're in Love was a good song, but I still thought Lay It Down was the first single. I thought What You Give Is What You Get was a great song and should have been a single. And then I thought the mind-blowing part in the day where ballads would totally send the record into the stratosphere, that I thought that Closer to My Heart, I remember listening back to that and I thought, why the hell didn't they release that as a single? They should have done a video, maybe on tour, and he's coming back from tour. I thought the whole thing out. I was like, somebody dropped the ball on marketing that record.
4 unfortunately for me, that fell way outside of my purview.
Of course.
And
But I thought that one should have been, you know, a lot of these bands would release like a giant record, and then their next one, like Great White was like that one with Rock Me. The next one was the one that I thought was a pile of shit. Was the giant 2 million seller, where you look back with the Rock Me and you're like, wow, that only went platinum. You know, I just thought that would have sent that into like 5-6 million copies. You know, I just thought that record should have been way bigger, because each record kind of went down, didn't it, in sales?
Generally speaking, I think that's correct.
Track 6, Between the Eyes. Nice DeMartini solo here, and I do like the song in a lot of ways, but it still doesn't even come close to getting a spot on Cellar. It is one of the only songs on Invasion that has a bit of that edge the band had before 1985, but barely. Track 7, What You Give Is What You Get. Nice riff. Robin Crosby solo. This is one of 5 songs on Invasion that Juan Crucier has a writing credit on, a much larger amount than on Out of the Cellar, and is the only song on the album he wrote by himself. It's a nice track, one I gave 4 stars. But yes, I'm going to say it again. It doesn't come close to making Out of the Cellar. Like the previous track, Between the Eyes, What You Give Is What You Get at least has a little bit of that edge, which I guess, if you're paying attention, means it doesn't sound too happy, but no. Nothing on the album has the energy of anything on Cellar. Just like Motley, as I said, on Invasion, Ratt now just sounds instantly fat and happy and rich, which is exactly what they were now, according to producer Beau Hill, with everybody in the band at this point apparently having a personal wealth of more than $1 million to their name, after just not having anything a year before.
So when the guys come in for Invasion, are they, I don't know if, I know publishing works to where maybe even 2 albums down, they start seeing publishing from the first record. I mean, are they all rich by that point, or are they still kind of struggling?
They, and I got this from their manager, each one of the guys in the band at the end of the Out of the Cellar cycle had a net worth of $1.2 million. So, in considering that they were gutter snipe when we went in to make Out of the Cellar, these guys were feeling pretty
rich. Yeah,
we're feeling pretty good financially.
Unfortunately, it shows in the songs on this album. Now, I don't mind my bands being rich. I just don't want them to sound rich. If my math is correct, Robin played by far his biggest ratio of the guitar solos on this album, which I didn't really realize until I stopped to do this review and actually thought about that for a while. It would be the last time he had more than a fraction. As a guy whose favorite player of the entire 1980s is Warren DeMartini, even I think that's a real shame. I mean, Warren's dominance after this point is at the same time totally understandable and also at least a little confusing to me. Warren is a much faster, more aggressive, more show-offy player on Out of the Cellar than he would ever be again after it. On Out of the Cellar, Warren is playing basically like Lynch does on Tooth and Nail or Under Lock and Key or Back for the Attack or every other album Lynch has ever played on since then. But Cellar and Invasion would see the duo pretty much at the peak of their sharing of the lead duties. And as Cellar was exploding onto the music scene in 1984, Ratt were very much being talked about by the guitar world at the time as the closest thing we had to a new Judas Priest. Guitar-wise, and so sort of an updated, younger version of Glenn and KK Downing, potentially. Or at least that's what we thought at the time. With Invasion, though, even Jakey Lee commented openly in a Guitar Magazine interview that he did with Warren that the first time he heard Warren's playing on You're in Love, he instantly knew, as he put it, Warren had got it. It had clicked for him on this album. Meaning, Warren had learned to really play to the song instead of just showing off how fast his fingers could move all the time, like Jake felt he'd sort of done on Out of the Cellar. But somewhere between Cellar and Invasion, the whole Guitar Hero thing started really being applied to Warren, exactly as it should have been. And at least partly because of that, by Dancing Undercover, Robin is down to 2 solos on a 10-track album. Meanwhile, Warren is soloing on almost everything because he's the fast guy with mad skills and the guitar hero. But at the same time, his playing has grown far more smooth and bluesy and slowed down accordingly from Invasion on. Well, I mean, Robin wasn't getting as much soloing now for exactly that reason, right? Because Warren was the guitar hero with the nickname Torch, and Robin was the songwriting guitar player who played the slower, more bluesy solos. But now Warren was playing slower, more bluesy solos like Robin and still getting all the solos now? Wait, what? Wouldn't the opposite seem to make more? What? Well, anyway, I love Warren DeMartini's playing on Cellar and after Cellar. I emulated his look when I was 15 or 16. And I was built a little like Warren back then. And I wanted to be Warren DeMartini for several years in my teens. And I was rooting for Warren to take over the leads on Ratt albums and got exactly what I wanted. And now I look back and I wonder why I didn't appreciate Robin Crosby a little more. Unfortunately, we would never get a chance to come around and celebrate the differences in the two players like we should have because, well, obviously we just never did. And then it was too late. Okay, enough guitar player talk. Sorry, I just find it endlessly fascinating how that whole dynamic worked in this band in particular. And while I love Warren, I feel for Robin. I really do. But moving on. Track 8, Got Me on the Line.
Hello?
Hello? Okay, so like I've been saying in this whole review, I just can't hear this song on Cellar. No chance. And if I'm in this band making this album, that's my gauge for every song written at this period. Does it make Cellar if we'd written it in 84? Because if it doesn't, then it doesn't make Invasion. Oh, but now you're fat, happy, and rich. And when the record company says to you in the middle of writing and recording this album, hey, we have an offer for some shows in Japan that we think you should do. You smile and say yes and get the hell on the plane. And it's going to cost you your career. You won't know it for a few years, but it's going to cost you your career. Because once you step out that door, you can never come back and follow up Cellar again. And I mean, we can say, well, the band should have known better, but of course they didn't. That's not their job at this time. Management and Atlantic Records should have known better. That's their job. And they blew it. Not by wanting the band to go to Japan, but by rushing the band to release the album. You may disagree. You may say so in the comments. You may kick and scream and yell and throw things, but I will always tell you that there is no bigger sin for a record company than to rush out a record just to get a record on the shelves. I believe it to be a mistake every time. Who gives a crap if there's a new record out if it's not as good as it should be? Hurrying is always the wrong choice. That's just my opinion. But I'm saying, had I been the president of Atlantic Records in 1985, Invasion would not have come out until it could rival Cellar and propel Ratt onto the next plateau where they could continue to compete neck and neck with Motley Crue. And with that in mind, show of hands, who here thinks Got Me on the Line can compete with Motley Crue? It's okay, sure. And I gave it 3 stars. But I never knew anybody who looked at Got Me on the Line and then looked at anything by Motley Crue and chose Got Me on the Line. Again, Cellar gave us Wanted Man, Back for More, Scene of the Crime, Lack of Communication, The Morning After, I'm Insane. Songs with some bite, songs with some attitude, songs with an edge. And Invasion gives us Give It All and Got Me on the Line. Some conflicting information on who plays this guitar solo. I can't seem to find any real consensus online, and sadly, I also don't seem to be able to find any live clips of the band playing the song back in the day. What I do find is one person saying DeMartini, the next one saying Crosby. It sounds like Crosby to me, especially toward the end. Robin has this heavy picking sound that's sort of like a crowbar beating on the strings when he solos, while Warren's picking sounds a little more cutting and slicing, like Lynch's. I don't really know how to explain that better, and I apologize, but there's a difference that can be heard if your ear is attuned to that sort of thing. Anyway, I'm not 100%, but I'm definitely going to say Robin played this one just for this video. Not that anybody's actually asking. If you know differently, or if you can confirm that, feel free to comment. Track 9, You Should Know By Now. Easily one of my favorite songs on Invasion of Your Privacy. It still doesn't make Cellar, no, but I love it anyway. Is it happy? Yeah. Does it have much of an edge? No. But I just think that melody is great, and I also really like the chord progression and the solo section and the harmonies and that bridge right before the guitars and bass drop out for the break. The lead playing is shared on this track, with some trading off, but Robin's a little more prominent for the most part. It really surprises me how little of the trade-off dual leads these guys actually did. Whenever they do, it's really great. It just barely happens for whatever reason. I give the song 4 stars. And it's definitely my favorite of the 4-star songs on Invasion. Track 10, Dangerous But Worth the Risk. Cool song, not great, but cool. I got to see Ratt on this tour in 1985 with Bon Jovi opening. And Ratt opened their show with this tune. I remember being really taken aback by that choice. I guess they opened with it for the entire tour as far as I've seen. Seems like a really weird choice to me, and always did. Good song, but odd energy to start a concert with, or should I say without. I mean, I guess. Whatever. As a guitar player, I really enjoy the different parts in the song. As anything else, I think I could get bored pretty easily here. Also, does anything about this song sound dangerous to you? Nice Warren solo, of course, but they all are. I don't really have much to say about this one, honestly. I've never disliked it. I just can't remember ever really loving it either, or caring about it. It's very okay. Another 3-star song on side 2. one of three of them. Every other song. I had it at 4, but when I listened again, it just didn't quite hold up to that for me. So, what's the bottom line? As if you didn't know. Well, the bottom line for me, I guess, is that on Out of the Cellar, just like with Motley Crue on Shout at the Devil, there was an edge. And then suddenly, on the very next album, after each band got some pretty extreme success, the edge was basically gone and replaced with a bunch of material that just sounds way too happy. Like I said in my Theater of Pain video, I believe, one album, they're loud, aggressive, dangerous, scary, dirty, dark. And then on the next album, they want to meet your parents and smile and talk to your parents instead of you at the backyard barbecue on Sunday afternoon, because they know you're young and your parents are the ones buying this stuff for you. And so now they've got something to lose and they're seeking approval. And now, rather than being hungry, they're protecting what they've got. Now they're trying to get on the radio. Now they're vying for their spot on MTV. And that's really about it. That's what they're suddenly all about. It wasn't just Ratt and Motley Crue who went through that kind of transformation during the 80s. It was most of these bands. And whether most of us want to admit so or not, it sucked. And for the most part, those albums sucked with it. Overall, Invasion gets 38 stars divided by the 10 tracks, and that equals a 3.8 star rating. I know some of you are going to find that harsh. But what can I say? It is how I feel. I love the album. I really do. Like I said, I listened to it a lot in the 80s, and I still listen to it fairly regularly even now. It's like I haven't stopped giving it another chance yet. But every time I do, I know it's not what could and should have been. Thanks, Atlantic, you fuckers. All right. Next will be the Dancing Undercover album. And I'm going on a vacation first, so I'll see you after that. Thanks for hanging out, Hard Rockers. Please understand, I know the kind of feedback I'm probably going to get on this video. I was just doing more research on YouTube and stuff today. I'm a member of a Warren DeMartini fan group on Facebook, and I see the comments when this album is talked about. I know everybody wants to defend this album, talk about how great it is. Half the people on one of the YouTube videos I just watched they were almost all saying how this album's actually the really great Ratt album, way better than Out of the Cellar. I mean, come on. What? You're the same people who won't listen to Appetite for Destruction or Dr. Feelgood or Kiss Destroyer because all your friends like it and you want to be different, right? Ridiculous. This album is way mediocre, but we'll see where it winds up in the overall rankings of these albums when I finish the Ratt videos. And I guess we can talk about that some more there. Adios.